We're just going to do a few more things in terms of eligibility, and this particular lecture, as you can see, is titled Counselor Consumer Determination of Vocational Goals and the Development of the IPE. Development of vocational goals, and I think this is something that I had talked with you about that I wanted to focus on. Individuals eligible for vocational rehabilitation services work with their counselor to identify vocational goals. The vocational goal is specific to the individual consumer, and it depends on the consumer's experience, interest, abilities, aptitudes, academic levels, as well as a consideration for what exists in the person's geographic region. And the IPE, the Individual Plan for Employment, must be developed within 90 days after the consumer is deemed and determined eligible for rehabilitation services. The vocational goals and objectives selected by the consumer guides the development of the IPE. And of course, what we want to focus on would be making sure that the consumer, in choosing a vocational goal, has been given the opportunity for informed choice, so that the goal is appropriate and meets the interest and the needs and the abilities of the consumer. The consumer's vocational goal must be consistent with strengths and interest, and again, that goes along with giving good feedback to the consumer from the counselor in terms of the person's interests, their temperament for different types of jobs, their academic levels, their aptitudes for doing certain types of jobs, and that would need to be tempered with the requirements for a training in a certain job area, as well as with opportunities for employment upon completion of whatever the training program would be. And goals should be determined in terms of competitive employment, supported employment, self-employment, full or part-time employment, or other types of employment configurations such as home employment or some other arrangement that's made. The tools for developing vocational goals include informational interviewing, where the counselor would work with the consumer to identify different types of occupations using different types of occupational information, that information that we gleaned and obtained from vocational evaluations. We might do job shadowing. We might do community-based assessment. We might have some community-based work experience. It can be paid or unpaid experience as part of the community-based assessment. Interest, aptitude, achievement testing. We might get information about consumers' interest from the person's interests, hobbies, families, friends, extended families, other significant individuals. We might also obtain information about the consumer's interest in employment through different clubs, religious groups, community participation. In certain instances, we might work directly with the notion of person-centered planning, and we would look to make sure that the consumer has hands-on experiences with involvement in determining the jobs that would be appropriate. It used to be, not so much anymore, but it used to be that that in rehabilitation, the assessment or the evaluation would include what's known as work samples, and work samples being kind of simulated job experiences for the person, where the evaluation would consist of developing a sample of a certain career area or a certain job area and doing a simulation so that the person would have the experience of doing that in the facility, the rehabilitation facility. Now, to a great extent, community-based work samples have gone out of vogue, and what we see now are more community-based employment evaluations, where the consumer goes into the community and is placed in different job areas in which the person can gain experience and in which the person can get an idea as to whether he or she wants and would like to do that particular work area. And this goes along with interviewing and evaluation. A consumer may be evaluated to determine his or her vocational interest and needs, and how the consumer can be assisted with developing a vocational career objective. As we've said before in other classes, other lectures, the evaluation may include physical, psychological, intellectual abilities, aptitude testing, intellectual testing, achievement testing. Part of understanding the consumer would be the past work, looking at transferable skills. Does the person have skills that they learned in one job that can be applied for another job? Vocational interests, looking at career opportunities and options the person may be interested in, and determining whether accommodations would be needed either for the training program and or actually doing the work activity. And other data pertinent to the individual's capacities, capabilities would include looking at occupational sources of information in addition to than just hands-on activities, but things such as going out and determining through using standard sources such as the Occupational Outlook Handbook, going online to look at different jobs and Googling or Yahooing, whatever you might want to call it, different job titles and looking at requirements for those jobs, pay rates, training expectations, opportunities for employment, the nature of the work. So you'd have the Occupational Outlook Handbook. The Dictionary of Occupational Titles is still used. ONET, the Occupational Information Network, is utilized. So all these sources and others of occupational information can be used in order to assist the consumer with developing the vocational goals that would be appropriate, or the vocational goal that would be appropriate in light of the abilities of the person and the training requirements and the opportunities for employment. The definition of the IPE is that it is a written plan developed through the state federal vocational rehabilitation program and the consumer for services that the consumer needs to help him or her reach his or her vocational goals. And it is mandated through the Rehabilitation Act. And I believe that if you go to the Rehabilitation Act, you can read about those provisions. But I'm sure that the detail there is probably more than is needed for a regular basis, but certainly is available. And as I said, we need to ensure that the consumer has a choice, and that we talk about the options that the consumer has, as well as the realities of different types of career patterns and different types of career interest and what's involved in selecting a career and selecting an area for training. The content of the IPE includes a statement of specific employment outcome, the services needed to achieve the outcome, a timeline for achievement of the outcome, who will provide the service, whether it's a training program, some sort of physical restoration, psychological counseling, some other types of service, on-the-job training, whether it's getting some prosthetic or orthotic device, or other types of, or some sort of technology that would all be part of the service provision aspect of the IPE. And there's also a notation as to how progress towards the outcome will be evaluated, and the counselor and the consumer would specify this, and the terms and conditions, including the responsibilities of the consumer, would also need to be addressed. And of course, on the IPE, as we talked in another lecture, the IPE certainly can be modified based upon circumstances and things that arise, whether it's changes in the consumer interest, or whether a certain career pattern or career opportunity or job is not appropriate, and certainly these items that are placed on the IPE can be modified. Now, after the IPE is developed, the counselor can continue and is expected to continue counseling and guidance. As we talked, physical and mental restoration, including surgery, prosthetic devices, vocational training and other training services. It can be on-the-job training, short-term training, formal training. Any services needed to be supportive to the family to ensure that the family unit is going to be supportive of the person, and to ensure the stability of the family in facilitating the consumers obtaining needed services and training programs, so that he or she can then transition from being dependent to being independent. Technology services that might be needed, accommodations that might be needed, can be interpreter services for consumers who have hearing impairments, reading services. It can mean personal adjustment services. It can also mean some sort of personal adjustment, work hardening, work adjustment services, things that can physically and mentally help the person prepare for employment. Personal adjustment services and work adjustment services would deal more with the mental aspects of being able to know how to work and to know how to be successful at work, and be able to interact with others, co-workers, supervisors, and others in the workplace, or perhaps even the public, to interact appropriately and be able to maintain the expected standards of employment, adhering to norms that are expected in employment with regard to being able to work with others, and being able to ensure that the job task is completed appropriately and is done properly. Personal adjustment services and work adjustment services are designed to help the person adapt and adjust both personally to the workplace, as well as socially in the workplace, and as well as externally in terms of making sure that the person is going to be able to function in the community. And then work hardening and work conditioning are designed to deal more with physical aspects of getting somebody physically ready to work. These are usually utilized more so in work injury types of cases, or where someone's had a physical injury. And work hardening basically means getting somebody prepared to do a specific job, where you'd identify the job and you'd physically condition the person to do that specific job. Very frequently, this is conducted by a physical therapist, sometimes occupational therapists, whereas the personal adjustment, work adjustment training would be done more so in a community rehabilitation program. And then we have work conditioning as opposed to work hardening, or to differentiate from work hardening. Work conditioning would be to condition the person to physically be better conditioned. Very often people who have not been working or been doing sedentary activities, when they go back or planning to go back to work, require a conditioning program to get them ready to be able to physically perform the general aspects, not the specific aspects of a job as you would do in work hardening, but the general aspects of the physical functions on a job. So that would be work conditioning. Again, we have telecommunications, other technical and assistive and adaptive equipment. Other services include job placement services, post-employment services, particularly if the consumer's job is in jeopardy, following up routine types of follow-up services. We might help the person in obtaining any licenses, tools, equipment, and initial supplies for a small business. In terms of initially helping the person on the job, and sometimes for extended periods, we might be involved in job coaching services. We might be doing job coaching as part of a supported employment program. We might assist in obtaining other goods and services that could aid the consumer in obtaining and maintaining employment. And we might also be involved in doing job accommodations and job modifications to assist the person, so that we would be working directly with employers to do job analyses. We might also be involved with helping the person with what I've referred to in the past as employability skill development. And employability skill development, as we've talked before, includes helping somebody prepare a resume, helping somebody be able to develop a job search strategy in terms of where to and how to identify jobs through newspapers or cold calls or telephone calls or through the internet or employment databases on the internet, using the services of the employment service. We also would help the person with interviewing and being able to discuss disability as it comes up, or as that would be consistent with the ADA, as well as being able to discuss the any accommodations that may be needed, and discuss that at the appropriate time after a job offer has been made. Any gaps in employment would need to be addressed. We can also, in addition to resume writing and a job search strategy and interviewing, we'd also can help the person with any sorts of questions regarding appropriate attire and grooming when going for an interview, and also when actually working on the job. And these would all be part of what we would be doing as part of the process of employability skill development. In terms of going back to a prior slide, in terms of ongoing counseling, we would address any issues that would arise with the consumer in terms of how they're doing in school, if there are any problems in school or in the training program with regard to meeting the expectations of the training program, or if for some reason the match, the fit between the person and the job or the training program is not appropriate. Keep on top of that to make sure that doesn't interfere with the person's ability to complete the rehabilitation program. And we do counseling to address any issues that might be interfering with the person's functioning and ability to successfully complete the training, and make sure that we've identified any additional resources or services, remedial services, or any sorts of accommodations or issues at work that need to be addressed. And then finally, we have some employment resources for occupational information. We have the ONET, which I've talked about, America's Career InfoNet, which would be the employment service, and one-stop programs and services available through one-stop programs. And we would have the Dictionary of Occupational Outlook Handbook, which is not listed up there. We have the Dictionary of Occupational Titles, which is listed here. and we also have the Occupational Outlook Handbook, which can be easily found online, and these and other references are available to assist individuals be able to get information about careers and resources for making career decisions. But it's up to us as the counselor to help through career counseling and vocational guidance to use all of the information, not just these resources, but all of the test results, the existing information that we have on a consumer, educational records, hospital records, doctor records, mental health records, whatever might exist, as well as past work and experience and information that the consumer brings and opportunities that exist in the job market where the person resides, and as we said, the results of any vocational or educational testing to help the consumer make an informed choice regarding a career. So that concludes this particular lecture, and if there are any questions, certainly please ask them.